This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, December 24th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in Europe, where Britain has detected a new variant of the coronavirus in contacts of cases who have traveled from South Africa, according to UK Health Minister Matt Hancock, as the country battles to curb a highly infectious mutated strain of the virus that is spreading fast. Hancock told a news conference in London Wednesday, quote, "This new variant is highly concerning because it is yet more transmissible and it appears to have mutated further than the new variant that has been discovered in the UK. South Africa's health department said last week that a new genetic mutation of the virus had been found and might be responsible for a recent surge in infections there. Hancock says that close contacts of those with the new variant are being quarantined, and all those who had been in South Africa in the last 2 weeks also needed to quarantine. He also said immediate restrictions were being imposed on travel from South Africa. Uganda seemed to be managing the COVID-19 pandemic well early on, but a second wave of the virus infections is now overwhelming hospitals with patients. Uganda has close to 32,000 confirmed cases of the virus, and at least 238 people have died from the illness. Halima Athumani has more from Kampala.
Ugandan talk show host Charles Odongtho was only showing mild symptoms from his COVID-19 infection until he was about to complete his 14-day quarantine.
My worst day so far has been on the 12th day, when, heat, chills on the body, and a very general weakness, which I cannot even explain, the knees, the joint pains, and then all these pains, and then a lot of headache.
Uganda's Ministry of Health says a second wave of infections like Odongtho's is straining Uganda's health care.
There is increased demand for high acuity beds, that is, high dependence unit and intensive care units. 2. There is increased requirement for round-the-clock patient care and monitoring, with more staff requiring than would normally be expected. 3. Exponential increase in oxygen utilization by over 10-fold.
The latest wave of illnesses came after the lockdown was lifted and people gathered in groups, says Dr. Jonas Tegen Woldemariam of the World Health Organization.
And until people keep distances, do this meeting in small numbers, keep a distance and keep hand hygiene, more and more Ugandans will get sick. And the more and more people get sick, the health services will not be able to cope with it.
At Mulago National Referral Hospital, there are just 8 functional beds in the intensive care unit and oxygen is in short supply. Hospital authorities say they are scrambling to accommodate the influx of patients.
We have 2 levels where we are looking after, and each level is of 56 bed capacity. So we have already set up a 3rd level, ready in case we need to expand. And the ministry is recruiting more doctors and nurses who will be nursing these people.
Meanwhile, Ugandan authorities are discouraging travel for the holiday season, fearing that the coming weeks could see another spike in confirmed cases. Halima Athumani for VOA News, Kampala.
Millions of Nigerian Christians are facing a bleak Christmas due to the economic impact from COVID-19 lockdowns that are increasing unemployment and food prices. Some Nigerian charities are providing food to vulnerable groups as the government reopens border trade closed over a year to stop smuggling to offer some relief. Here's Timothy Obiezu in Abuja.
Internally displaced people line up at an Abuja camp for rice, beans and spices from a charity ahead of Christmas. The coronavirus pandemic shrunk Nigeria's economy this year by more than 3.5%, driving up job losses and food prices.
And millions of people in Nigeria they do not know where their next meal is coming from. And people want to celebrate Christmas, people want to eat, people want to be happy, they want to live their lives.
Vulnerable groups like IDPs are among the worst affected. Philibia Elisha fled Borno State a decade ago to escape Boko Haram militants. But this year, she says, has been the most challenging.
The time this COVID-19 come, my husband not do anything. Me too, I not do anything. We'll suffer, a lot suffer.
Last week, Nigerian authorities reopened border trade with Benin, Cameroon and Niger to help boost the COVID-hit economy. Nigeria halted border trade a year ago to stop smuggling and support local producers. But it put pressure on food prices, which jumped about 17%. Trade experts say the reopened borders should help the economic community of West African states to recover, especially Nigeria.
There will be more recovery when we trade, because one thing that we saw in the onset of corona was disruption of the global supply chain, and that hit many countries. In particular, Nigeria was also hit, terribly hit. Now, 80% of the manufacturing capacity in Nigeria are dependent on imported raw materials.
Liberal trade is key to the African Continental Free Trade Area set to begin in January. Many African countries, including Nigeria, are hoping the trade bloc will bring a quick return to the economic growth, low prices and jobs that are missing this holiday season. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
More than 170 people have died from yellow fever outbreaks in Nigeria this year, despite vaccines being available since 2004. Experts say apathy to vaccines in rural areas is the biggest challenge. Ifyoke Tang has the latest from Bauchi, Nigeria.
Nigerian car washer Jonathan Saleh survived yellow fever 23 years ago before a vaccine was available to treat the mosquito spread virus.
So when I have that sickness, that fever, my lips turns yellow and my tongues and my eyes, my eyeballs becomes yellowish, and I was vomiting yellow. So I was thinking I'm going to die, and God saved me. I went to the hospital, they gave me drip and some drugs.
Nigeria has had the yellow fever vaccine since 2004 and offers it free for children. But since 2017, outbreaks of yellow fever have left scores dead and many others suffering. In Nigeria's state worst hit by the virus, Bauchi, medical authorities say many parents still fail to get their children vaccinated.
Out of the people that we sample, half have not taken the vaccination. The children that were sampled up to the age of 5, half have not taken the vaccinations.
While apathy among parents is the main challenge to vaccines, some Nigerians also opt for traditional medicine instead.
We just agree with herbal medicine. We don't often go to the hospital. That is how we are here. How we are treated is that a syringe is placed in a fire. Once the needle turns red, the herbal doctor makes some prayers on the syringe before piercing it into your chest. That is the gift God has given him.
Immunologists say more Nigerians are willing to get the yellow fever vaccine, which lasts a lifetime.
If you actually, because there is great awareness now, almost everybody is aware of immunization. So that of traditional, we find is very minute number of people that go for traditional actually.
The Nigerian federal government is carrying out a massive yellow fever immunization campaign starting mid-January 2021. Ifyoke Etang for VOA News, Bauchi, Nigeria.
Protests in Nigeria advocating police reforms lasted for weeks and garnered global attention. The Nigerian government has made reforms, including dissolving the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, But activists, academics, and human rights advocates say the fight for justice and sustainable change is far from over. Viewer Salam Solomon reports.
Lekki Toll Gate, a nondescript toll plaza on a busy Lagos highway, has become a rallying cry for Nigerians demanding police reform. After dark on October 20, eyewitnesses say security forces opened fire on protesters demonstrating against Nigeria's special anti-robbery squad known as SARS. According to Amnesty International, at least 12 people were killed at Lekki and a second location, though the government said 2 people died.
This place was a war zone. But it was one army fighting civilians, unarmed civilians, peaceful civilians, civilians who were exercising their constitutional right.
Days of confrontation followed between protesters and police, the largest in more than a generation. The clashes left at least 51 civilians, 11 police officers and 7 soldiers dead, according to government figures. The Nigerian government vowed investigations and reform. It disbanded the SARS unit, reassigned officers, and promised additional human rights training. There are several investigations underway looking into alleged police abuse of power. Officials in recent days admitted that the soldiers did have live rounds while at Lekki, but they say that forces did not fire into the crowd and acted with restraint.
At this point, it is important to say that the federal government is very satisfied with the role played by the security agencies, especially the military and the police, all through the NSAS crisis. The security agents were professional and measured in their response. Even when their lives were at stake, they exercised uncommon restraint.
Rights groups say that the SARS unit, before it was disbanded, had been a symbol of excessive force.
This unit had been associated with egregious and systematic human rights abuses, including torture, extrajudicial execution, arbitrary detention. They were almost a law unto themselves and had been the focus of concern by the media as well as by domestic and international human rights groups for several years. And so when the announcement came that the unit was going to be disbanded, on the one hand, it represented a major step forward, but on the other hand, there was nothing else. And that triggered the protests that were linked to calls for systematic, comprehensive security sector reform and reform of the police.
Protesters say disbanding the SARS police unit was not enough. They are calling for lasting police reform at all levels, and they say their demands are not being met. There are allegations that Nigeria's security forces continue to use heavy-handed tactics against members of the public and have done so for years. During last summer's COVID-19 lockdown, Nigeria's National Human Rights Commission found that security forces killed 18 people. Rights groups say the culture of police abuse is pervasive. In Africa's most populous nation, where the median age is 18, many of the protesters are young people. Analysts say their public dissent is likely to continue.
But one thing is clear, right? What is clear is that the youth in Nigeria are awake, right? They have decided that they have a voice, right? And that the government is going to hear their voice one way or the other.
Nigeria's attempt for reform is being closely watched in the United States, where policymakers have been instrumental in calling for reform and organizing the Nigerian diaspora to demand action from the international community. After protests spread throughout Nigeria in October, U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a Democrat from Texas, marched with her constituents in the Mickey Leland Federal Building in Houston to show solidarity with the Nigerian protesters.
They want a free, peaceful Nigeria, free of the killing of innocent persons. They're outraged by the violence, the burning that they've seen, the killing at the gate that they have had to experience. They had a video showing the outright shooting by military persons that would really break your heart, because you know that unarmed persons lost their life that night. Someone's young son or daughter.
Opal Tamedi, a Nigerian-American human rights activist, says Nigeria must allow public dissent.
It is not tenable. The brutality that the protesters have been met with is not tenable. They had a right to assemble. They have a right to protest. And in many ways, it's their duty to protest when things have been so bad. When they've gotten to a certain point, you have no other choice.
As a Nigerian judicial panel continues its investigation into excessive force, 154 organizations from the world over have asked the International Criminal Court in The Hague to conduct its own probe. Salim Salman, VOA News, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come. There's a crisis ongoing in South Africa, but it's not what you may think. We'll have a report from Johannesburg when we come back.
Is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Instability is escalating ahead of Sunday's election in the Central African Republic, where United Nations peacekeepers are battling rebels. The president is accusing a rival of plotting a coup, and Russia and Rwanda have sent military support. David Doyle has our report.
Bangassou may appear calm today, but the town's recent history is written on bullet-scarred buildings and on streets littered with rubble. With an election on Sunday, there are fears that a new chapter in Central African Republic's history of ethnic and religious bloodshed is about to be written. Today, security forces and UN peacekeepers are doing battle with rebels who have seized towns and roads and are threatening the capital, Bangui, and world powers have also been drawn into the conflict. In Bangassou, Ismail Dickey knows the cost of such violence.
We lost our parents, our belongings, our homes. As you can see, the mosque is destroyed. So really, the consequences of the war are very difficult.
In 2017, a militia largely drawn from the Christian minority and known as the Anti-Balaka attacked Bangassou and targeted Muslims. At the end of a 3-day siege, the Red Cross counted at least 140 dead. The Anti-Balaka were a response to the heavy-handed rule and alleged human rights abuses of a government that came to power when mostly Muslim Seleka fighters ousted former President Francois Bozize in 2013. Despite several peace deals between warring militias, the election of President Faustin Archange Touadéra in 2015 and the presence of over 12,800 uniformed UN peacekeepers, Central African Republic has failed to stabilize.
Yes, we are worried because in past elections politicians didn't get along, unlike us citizens.
Once again, the politicians are at odds. Bozize was recently barred from standing in Sunday's election by Central African Republic's highest court. Since then, clashes have escalated. Touadéra accuses Bozize of plotting a coup. Russia and Rwanda have sent military support to the mineral-rich but impoverished country. Some opposition parties have called for the election to be postponed. but that's been rejected by the government and the United Nations, which has placed its troops in the capital and other regions on high alert and vowed to protect civilians and secure the vote.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Niger voters will go to the polls on Sunday to choose a new president and members of parliament, with economy, security, and coronavirus topping their list of electoral issues. 30 candidates are vying for president's office, but VOA Hausa reporter Mahmoud Lalo observed a lack of interest in the election among some voters due to the disqualification of the main opposition candidate. Here is his report.
Niamey, Niger's capital, is wearing a new look. Pictures of presidential candidates on large billboards staring at passers-by as campaigns intensify for the office of the president and the 171 legislative seats that are up for grabs. But behind these posters was a noticeable lack of interest in the election among voters.
Yau shekara 30 muka zabe kasar ga tamu, ba a taba zabe na dandace ba a taba zabe na rumbuce ba, hakan ga kowa ta hana shi ke bai san inda za a kamar bana. Don haka mutane dole su yi ɗarɗarɗar, wasu sun shirya, wasu ba shirya ba.
Hama Amadu of Lumana Party, a former Speaker of the Parliament and two-time Prime Minister, seen as a strong contender, was disqualified from the race by the Constitutional Court on the ground of his conviction over a baby trafficking scandal in 2017.
Kotun koli ta yi watsi da takarar dan abin Hama Amadu jagoran Modern Lumana, amma ba wannan ba ke nuni kamar ba ruwanmu da zabuka masu zuwa, tunda abin da mun ka sa gaba shine sauyi a cikin ƙasar Niger, kuma sauyin da Hamma Amadu ko kuma da wani ɗan takara na gungun 'yan adawa duk ɗaya ne gare mu.
Bazoum Mohamed, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, is the candidate of the ruling PNDS Tarayya. With no strong opposition candidate in the race, Bazoum, a close ally of the outgoing president, may secure votes enough to give him the presidency in the first round of the election.
Za mu lashe zaɓe tunda abin da yasa muka ce muku muna tsammanin za mu lashe zaɓe tsakani da Allah. Bancin mu kadai mun lashe wajen kashi 50 bisa ga 100 abin da ya haka nan. In an gama da fartukan da gaima tarayya goyon baya, da gaima shugaba Bazoum goyon baya, wajen farti 50 suke, yau ma sun wuce 50. Kenan za mu dibin ƙuru abin da za mu samu ma sai a ce kashi 60 ko abin da ya kashi 60 bisa ga 100.
Bazoum's candidacy was also fraught with challenges. Some of the presidential candidates and Hama Amadu, who was disqualified, questioned Bazoum's Nigerian citizenship, asking the court to disqualify him from the race.
Takardun naka na karkiki ne, ikon naku na karya ne. Kenan me za mu yi da makareki a gaban Niger? Ba mu yarda. Don haka ina so da Allah mutanen Niger ku tashi tsaye. Ba ce ku fito ku yi fada ba, an ce ku fito ku yi zabe.
Niger has a population of over 22 million people. 7.4 million were registered to vote in the forthcoming election.
Nigerian electoral laws require a presidential candidate to secure 51% of the votes. If no candidate holds these votes from Sunday's polls, it means the election will go into a second round on the 21st of February. That will mean a long wait for voters before they'll be able to know who the next president is.
Many voters say they are looking for a leader who will turn around the economy, tackle insecurity and coronavirus.
Muna fatan Allah ba mu shugaba tsarkake ingantacce wanda zai kawo kwanciyar hankali da tattalin arziki da dufa wanda ya zamanto al'umma gaba daya idan aka zabe shi hankali zai kwanta.
A landlocked country, Niger is seen as a major transit route for migrants heading to Europe. Today, the country grapples with frequent droughts, insurgency and widespread poverty. High expectations await anyone who becomes the next Niger's president. Mahmoud Lalo, VOA News, Niamey, Niger.
There's a crisis in South Africa's competitive chess world that cuts to the core of the country's own struggles to build a fair society. VOA's Anita Powell has more from Johannesburg.
Chess is taught as a game of skill and savage elegance, played out on a board where both sides are equal. But in South Africa, one of the world's most unequal societies, the business of chess is not that simple. For 3 years, the National Federation has been embroiled in expensive lawsuits that have thrown the sport into confusion and, Parliament argues, kept deserving players away. As a result, the government has suspended its funding, about $120,000 per year, until they break the impasse. Chess South Africa ranks 12-year-old Lulu Miaka at 52nd nationally in her age group. And while she doesn't know what's going on in the back ranks of the organization, she sees the effects every weekend when she goes to a tournament or plays online and sees only well-off players.
I would really like for them probably to make it cheaper so that the less fortunate kids can also play. But for me, I do play a lot, but I don't see the less fortunate kids because they made it very expensive just to join a tournament, which they can't go into.
That continuing inequality and how to address it seems to be the crux of the problem here. The National Federation has two dueling boards with two very different visions, both claiming to lead and taking their argument to court. Parliament called in the factions in November to account for themselves, leading them to agree to start arbitration. VOA wanted to fairly represent the two men who claimed the top spot. So we flipped a coin to decide who got to speak first and asked, what's the main problem?
Our focus should be on leveling the playing field, bring everybody on board, and remember for the children, this is also part of socialization and education. That's why it's very important. That's why transformation is actually very important.
The transformation narrative is abused to score political points and to create an emotional agenda. And it also has the side effect, and in my mind, one of the worst side effects that you can have is that it gets rid of it gets rid of competence.
The government appears to side with Mahamole's call to level the playing field, but the international chess body, FIDE, has vowed neutrality. Tuli Miaka, a self-described chess mom, offered an elegant solution to both warring presidents.
I think the two guys should step down on my position, on my take for everything, so that we don't have fights. We're not here to fight, we're here to play.
Will they take that advice? South Africa is the continent's chess powerhouse, with the greatest number of top-rated players in Africa. Or will this power game end bitterly? Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voanews.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.